All right, I'll turn things back over to Pat to welcome and introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Amy. Well, after reading The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America, Sharon Froba, a retired teacher, and David Froba, a retired attorney, decided to see how that history played out in Modesto. After multiple trips to the county clerk recorder's office, they were able to document that by 1950, fully half of the Modesto area was covered with the most racist of racially restrictive covenants on housing. The Frobas will talk with us about how this history occurred and what we might be able to do about the residuals of this discrimination. So I'd like to welcome David and Sharon. Thank you very much for coming and being on our program tonight. David, it's yours.
Okay, I'm going.
Sharon's going to talk first.
Yes,
Okay.
I certainly am. It's great to be back here. When I say great to be back, I want to remind a few of you about the last time I spoke to the League of Women. It was decades ago. I spoke to your ancestors. Actually, it was 20 years ago when I was invited to speak about a program I created at Modesto High called Day of Respect. Does that ring a bell with any of you? Well, at that time, I had to research the county and recruit as many people as I could, volunteers who would be willing to tell 15-minute stories of discrimination. The purpose of Day of Respect was to make students more understanding of what people endure due to the ignorance or intolerance of others. I started that program in 1998, and it's still continuing, even far after my retirement in 2002. A teacher at Modesto High is keeping it alive. Her name is Andrea Pegarella, and I'm very grateful to her for continuing the program. But this recent journey that Dave and I are on is also about discrimination. It began with me in 2016. A friend was at my house learning about a mentoring program I was organizing. Marianne Villalobos is the friend, and I'm wondering if she's a member of this organization. Anyway, she told me that she had recently moved and asked if I knew about her move. And I said, no, I had no idea. And she said, well, I moved to a home on Princeton Avenue in the college area. And she went on to say that the house had the strangest restriction on its deed. I asked, strange how? And she said, racial. When I received a copy of it by email, I was shocked at the language. It reads as follows: no part of said real property shall be occupied by any person or persons not of the white or Caucasian race, or by any Mexican, Filipino, or Hindu. But household servants of bona fide residents upon said property shall not be deemed occupants thereof. I was shocked by the language, and it was important for me to see it in official print. I mistakenly thought in 2016 that such discrimination occurred in the Jim Crow South, certainly not in the North, not in Modesto. Fortunately, housing discrimination ended legally with the Fair Housing Act in 1968. Hooray for the civil rights period. In the midst of my early search for more restrictions, because, you know, a restriction represents all restrictions that are in that subdivision. So a subdivision can have 10 homes in it, or 310 homes. And that would mean that all the homes in that subdivision had the same restriction. During that time of my early search, in 2017, I happened to hear an interview on NPR. Terry Gross was interviewing Richard Rothstein about his new book, The Color of Law. I was amazed at the coincidence. I was looking for the historical context for the restrictions, and voila, there was Terry Gross interviewing a person who was going to tell me all about the historical context. By that time, after I got the book, Dave was on board. He and I both read it, were amazed that our country, through New Deal policies, segregated our country. De jure segregation, not de facto. De facto meaning accidental, people moving to a neighborhood because they had relatives there or friends there or so forth. No, this is de jure segregation. The first of the two policies that were put into effect in the 30s, the Public Works Administration, also known as the PWA, in 1933, it worked to alleviate a housing shortage and to create jobs in construction. There were 47 projects throughout the whole country. 17 were for Black occupants. No question, Black people had to live in certain buildings. They weren't all high rises. I think of them as high rises, but they weren't all necessarily high rises. And these weren't subsidized. This wasn't subsidized housing at all. The second policy was the Federal Housing Administration that we know as the FHA. It was established in 1934, and it built massive housing subdivisions in suburbs and subsidized whites with low interest mortgages. Blacks were excluded. You may have heard of Levittown. Levittown in Long Island is often considered as one of the finest examples of the first subdivisions or the first suburb. In 4 years, 17,447 homes, small homes, 2-bedroom homes of 725 square feet were built. They were completed after the war, 1947, just in time for the GIs returning from the war to purchase. And they were purchased for a little less than $7,000 each. One story I read about the building of Levittown was that 12 houses were built per day. Whites only. Black GIs had to rent city apartments, paying more in rent than whites paid in mortgages. Most white GIs paid either no down payment or just a very small amount. I'll bring you a little closer to home. No Black people were allowed to buy homes in Daly City or Westlake. If you're familiar with the suburb of San Francisco, Daly City, I have a cousin who lives above the Cow Palace on the hills in an area called Southern Hills. She and her husband bought their home in Southern Hills in 1963 for $28,000. Today, that home, 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, is worth $1,100,000. A wonderful inheritance for their 2 sons. For Day of Respect at Modesto High, I too tell a couple of stories every year. And one has to do with housing in San Francisco, where I was born and raised. And it also has to do with Willie Mays, the former Giant center fielder. I remember the day at Herbert Hoover Junior High when I was talking with a circle of friends, when my friend Elaine announced to us that Willie Mays had moved into the house across the street from her. Well, at that moment, she became my new best friend. And for the next 2 weekends, my autograph book and I hung out at her house on her front porch, staring at the house of Willie Mays for 2 weekends. We were ready to accost him if we saw him and have him sign our autograph books. I don't know, we never thought to go up the stairs, ring the doorbell and say, hello, we're from across the street. Never occurred to us. But there was no sign of Willie Mays. It was 1957 or 58 that the New York Giants became the San Francisco Giants. That's when the San Francisco Giants were born, and that's when Willie Mays moved to San Francisco. He was 24 years old, and he and his wife looked for a home. He had $37,000 cash to purchase a home on Mariloma Drive in San Francisco, a lovely area. And $37,000 was the asking price for this particular home, but the seller was reluctant. Several neighbors signed a petition to keep Willie Mays out of the neighborhood. One reason, he was Black. That was it. He could be a hero on the ball field, but these folks on Mariloma Drive didn't want him living in their neighborhood. Willie was able to buy the house. Finally, he negotiated to buy it and lived there only for a couple of years, from what I recall. That house today, $3 million, if not more than that. Dave and I have been amazed that our government, through New Deal policies, segregated our country. I'll say it again. Our government segregated our country by law. De jure segregation, not de facto. I actually found a lie in a US history textbook that all our public high school students read. And it isn't an old textbook. It was written in 2019, Houghton Mifflin. And the lie said that in the North, there was not segregation by law. It was de jure. After Dave and I read the book, then we had to deal with, how do we find more restrictions in Modesto? Because the book didn't exactly tell us how to go about it. So we went to the we went to the assessor's office first, and a wonderful gentleman there told us about the GIS, the Geographic Information System, that can be accessed by our home computers. All of you can go to GIS Central Stanislaus and find your subdivision. We downloaded maps from the 1930s and 40s that we were confident would have restriction numbers. And it was those numbers that we needed at the county clerk's office to pull up the restrictions. So many, many times we would go down to the county clerk's office, maps in hand. We spent hours there, but each time we would leave with at least 2 restrictions. There was no need to pay for the documents. We simply photographed them with our phones. I created a spreadsheet. Dave highlighted the subdivisions with restrictions on a 1950 Modesto map. which you'll see on one of his slides. Currently, the spreadsheet is 33 pages long and contains 91 Modesto subdivisions with actual restrictions. The summer of 2019, 9 Modesto High students worked with us on surrounding areas, Turlock, Newman, Denair. Before the shutdown, we spoke to geography professor Jose Diaz-Garayua at Cal State Stanislaus about creating an interactive online version of our map so that students and others, so that all of you could access it. The online map is complete and Dave will show you the link.
Okay.
Wait a minute, Dave.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm concluding. Most important, our purpose is to reveal to all that owning a home is the best way to create wealth. The wealth disparity between Blacks and whites is huge. Whites have 10 times the wealth as Blacks, largely due to home ownership. Once you're aware of this housing injustice, you may see it everywhere. Dave and I recently spent a couple of nights in Carmel. Our hotel was close to Shore Road, which parallels the ocean, and where homes worth millions are located. I wasn't in awe as I used to be when seeing such beauty and wealth. I looked at each massive home and wondered how many generations of wealth produced that home. Our goal is to complete our work and to continue to inform the public about this injustice. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's very good to be here. Let me start with the slideshow. Has everybody got that? Okay. This was the book that we read, Richard Rothstein, The Color of Law. And we communicated with him when we began our search if he could help us learn how to do it. And he said, no, he didn't know, but he hopes that we were successful. So we've been in contact with him regularly since we started the project, and he's been to our house. He was going to be here for a forum at MJC, but it got canceled or at least rescheduled because of COVID. This is just some examples of places around town. Liberty Park Track, MJC area near Virginia and Caldwell. And the restriction says no portion of said tract shall be occupied or used by any person unless he be of the Caucasian or white race, except as a domestic servant of a qualified owner or occupant. For the purposes of this restriction, Filipino or Hawaiian shall not be deemed to be members of the Caucasian or white race. Who knows why that specifics are in there? Now, the way this works is these covenant restrictions are put on all houses in a subdivision. So like the subdivision that I just showed you, if somebody up here with lot number 1 is unhappy with the racial makeup of somebody down here at the end of the block, he could go to him and say, you can't move in here because it's against the law. If you do, I'll sue you. And it's right in here, you'll pay my attorney's fees. So don't move in here. Or he would tell the realtor. And that's the way it worked. I don't think it usually had to happen because everybody knew what the rules were and they didn't try to break them. Campus Track, MJC, College and Caldwell. No part of any said real property should be occupied by any person or persons except of the white or Caucasian race or any by Mexican, Filipino, or Hindu but household servants of this residence upon said property shall not be deemed occupants thereof. We've never been able to figure out why it is that some restrictions name particular groups and others different groups. Riverview Tract, Robertson Road on the other edge of town. It's on the Tuolumne River and and this was built of a low-income housing, but it's a very large tract. It's about 300 houses, I believe, directed particularly for returning vets. And the thing that's really interesting is that it has restrictions on it. And the fact that this was in a floodplain, which was going to flood, and the dams hadn't been built, was massively stupid. They had no problem with having the flood, but what you didn't want to have is a person of color living next door to you. Same type of thing. College area, Tract Granger and College, same type of thing. College Gardens, Tully and Roseburg, a little bit lower scale, same thing. This has got no Japanese, Chinese, or Turkish empire on it. Sunrise Homes over in the La Loma area, but very near Yosemite Boulevard, getting close to the airport district. No person of any race other than white or Caucasian race shall use or occupy any building except this covenant shall not prevent occupancy by domestic servants of a different race than the owner. This is up in the northeastern part of town. Same thing. So this is the map that was created for us by Dr. Jose Diaz-Gadayua at Stan State. And the colors are as follows. The red is where we have restrictions. The yellow is where we're pretty sure there's a restriction based upon the place, location, and the time, but we haven't been able to find it yet, but it's strongly suspected. The orange ones, we know that there is restriction somewhere because there's newspaper articles advertising these subdivisions as racially restricted, but we haven't been able to find them yet. This is the website to get to the, or this is the URL to get to the website, or just Google RRC racially restrictive covenant and Stan State, it'll come up. Now we found these different categories of people were excluded from buying a home. We have no idea why. Non-white or non-Caucasian, Negroes, Mexicans, Asiatics, Chinese, Hindus, Japanese, Malayans, Filipinos, natives of the Turkish Empire, Hawaiians, and Armenians. The last one is the most ridiculous of all because Armenia is in the Caucasus Mountains and there's nobody in the world more Caucasian than Armenian. But these are not matters of reason, they're matters of pure prejudice. Oh, we've got Cubans. And this is the way the GIS that Sharon talks about gives you the color-coded subdivisions. And you click on one, for example, the one right here, and this box comes up. This is the Liberty Park tract, and attachment, and the attachment will give you the subdivision map. You get the specifics of all the houses. And all of these that we found that had restrictions, or most of them, had right there and here it says restrictions, and it gives numbers. And then you can look them up at the recorder's office, although it's not easy to do even with that. This is we're going to go now to the Stan State restrictive map. You go down here to web mapping applications, and the map comes up. unfortunately, if you try to mess with this thing, it'll go bad. So I have to just leave it that way, kind of small. But just click on, I'll just click on one of these, for example. And you see that's the James tract.
Hey,
And it's got-
David, all we're seeing right now on our screen is still your PowerPoint presentation. So you might need to minimize the PowerPoint for us to see the map because we're
Okay,
just-
thank you.
Yep, not a problem.
Thank you. Is it on there now? Is the map on there now?
No,
Okay, I think I'm gonna probably have to close on there now.
No.
Nope, we're still just seeing the PowerPoint.
Okay,
We will bear with you while you navigate technology.
yeah. Does that come up? No?
Yes, now
We got a map.
Yep.
Okay,
back.
good.
There we go.
Now, let's just click on one of these and see it, it highlights Wilson School Tract. You all see that now?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
here's the restriction. This one, persons not of the white or Caucasian race or by any Mexican, Filipino, or Hindu. And this gives you the link to the subdivision map. And here's the declaration of restrictions down here that you can look up the restriction. Okay. Is the, oh, you got to open up the PowerPoint. There we go. Is that showing for everybody?
That's right. You're cooking with gas now, Dave.
How's that?
You're good.
Okay, good. Now, the Fair Housing Act of 1968, wait a minute, there's another one here. Oh. The Fair Housing Act of 1968 finally eliminated most legal racial restrictive housing. But the restrictions themselves were outlawed in the case of Shelley v. Kramer in 1948. Now, this is some of the idea of our current ongoing research, interrupted by the COVID. You see down here where, just look up here, it says, a restricted racial residence district, all in capital letters, protects your investment and assures you of a community of desirable neighbors and modern homes. We're pretty sure we know what that means. Down here, you'll see College Side is the area directly surrounding Modesto High School, which was just being built at that time. I think this is 1918. It was like a good place to live next door to the high school. But the reason that they wanted to build racially restrictive covenants, this goes way back, is because right up here was the area on the old part of Modesto between G Street, south of G Street, and southwest of the railroad tracks. That was the only place where the Chinese could live. So those were outlawed in 1917. So they immediately started putting up racially restrictive covenants because they couldn't zone out by race anymore. So this is a summary of the racial housing discrimination in Modesto. From 1885 to 1917, you had racial restrictions by zone. That was outlawed by the Supreme Court. So then they went to the racially restrictive covenants, outlawed in 1948. And between 48 and 98 or 68, it was still illegal. It was still legal for individuals to discriminate. So you could say no, I'm not going to sell my house to you because you're Black, perfectly legal. Or more importantly, your realtor would say that. This is some of our ongoing research. This is a map of 1917 or 18 of the city of Turlock. It's pretty much all of the city of Turlock is in this subdivision map. And right up here, it says for restrictions, ask for quotation marks, special restrictions. Now, we're pretty sure what that means is they had outlawed Asians completely from the city of Turlock. The city of Turlock in 1917 had race riots to exclude Japanese laborers who were thought to be diluting the wages of the white people. Physically ran them out of town, went and found them, took them out of town and said, don't come back. This is what Sharon was talking about, a textbook that we found. But after their arrival, African Americans found themselves with racial discrimination in the North as well. Many African Americans faced social and economic pressures that forced them into segregated neighborhoods. This kind of segregation is known as de facto segregation. Although not enforced by law, de facto segregation has had some of the same effects on African Americans in northern cities as de jure segregation had on African Americans in the South. Now that's a front to the truth, and it's also a front to us from the South. I was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, that it was blaming it all on us. It was not all in the North. It was not all in the South. Okay, well, I just have a couple of comments. I mean, you might say, and some people have said, well, why do you dredge up all this negative stuff? And why do we had the character in our country to gradually get over these things. We passed laws outlawed. Why don't we just leave it there and get on with it? Well, the problem is that it's not something that just stopped in 1968. Look at it this way. How many people in this room owe some of their wealth to a piece of property that you inherited in whole or in part from a family member? That's an extremely important thing in building economic opportunity. If you've got a house, you can pass it on to your kids or your grandkids or whatever. If you've got a house, you can use it to leverage an educational loan. You have a house, you can use it to leverage a business. So not having the opportunity for many years to get a house was hugely influential and diminished personal wealth of Blacks. I think the African Americans have like 1/6 of personal wealth, and this is a large reason for it. So it continues to affect, that discrimination continues to affect people in the present day. And nobody should feel guilty about that now, because none of us are old enough to have contributed to that. But we do need to feel responsible, because it's something that we benefited from that diminished the value of other people, and something needs to be done about it. Now, that's the hard part. Now, I'm going to turn it back to Sharon, who will tell us what to do about it.
Well, here's just an option for you. I am housing chair of the NAACP. And ever since January, when I got that position, my committee and I have been wondering, what are we going to do about this huge housing need in our county? I mean, there are 15,485 households. I'm not talking about individuals. I'm not talking about homeless people. I'm talking about 15,485 households of people who need affordable housing, because 75% of them are paying over 50% of their income on rent. That is wrong. It's unfair. So there is the former municipal golf course that the city owns. And we on the committee have decided that that is what we're going to hopefully turn into housing. Maybe not all of it. I mean, I'd love another park in Modesto. Most people would. But that's not going to help 15,485 households find housing. So we're in the process of lobbying the city council to build housing on the former Muni golf course. There are 54 acres. Certainly a portion of those 54 acres can be used for housing, and a portion for maybe commercial use, a portion for walkways, parks, whatever. We're open to that. It doesn't all have to be used for housing, but certainly a portion of it needs to be. Any comments from all of you out there, any of you out there? If you would be interested in helping us, city council meetings start at 5:30, the first, second, and fourth Tuesday night. And there's that microphone that's available, or you could Zoom in, or you could send emails. We need housing for so many people. And I haven't even mentioned the refugees. There are 21 refugee families currently living in motels, and they need permanent housing as well.
David and Sharon, thank you so much. I've got 2 questions in the chat, and then I also have 2 hands raised. So I'm going to take the 2 questions in the chat first. And then Robin, you'll be next, and Richard after Robin, because that's the order that I saw hands come up. So to start with, a question from Jane Manley asking, have you talked with Garrett Marsh? His grandmother owned the big house on Buena Vista that used to overlook her hog farm, now Kewen Park. He can share some stories with you. So have you guys connected with Karen?
No.
Good to know. We'll check that out.
Thank you.
Excellent.
It'll be on our list.
Great. All right. Diane wanted to know if all the 15,000 that you referenced, Sharon, are renters and I'm going to attack and specifically in Modesto, or does this also account for part of our homeless population?
No, it does not include the homeless. These are households in Stanislaus County. They're not only in Modesto, they're in the whole county.
And I
Yes.
don't think the data that we have indicates whether they're renters or owners, but I would assume they're, most all of them are renters.
No, they are renters. I'm quite confident that they are.
Oh, okay.
Yes, absolutely. And the exact figure is 76% of them are paying over half of their income on rent.
Thank you. Robin, you had raised your hand. Did you have a question or comment? Take yourself off mute, please.
Yes, I did. And thank you both, Frobas, for your volunteerism here. I want to know the proposal that you're suggesting for the golf course there. That's right next to the SOS Club, which has become a school. Tell us what's happened with the school. What is that going to be serving a new community that you might envision there? What is going on with the school at the SOS Club?
Actually, I think we have to put that on our list too. We haven't really investigated the school.
And it's close. It's not directly adjacent to the Muni, I don't believe. And it's a charter school, so they can get students from wherever they want, I think.
Excellent. Richard, you had a question?
Yeah, a comment. Actually, I wanted to thank Dave and Sharon for that wonderful project. And since it involved college students and I think high school students too, I mean, it's just a wonderful kind of project. And last Sunday, they made the top headline in the Modesto Bee, in their proposal to do something with the Muni here. Well, anyway, you probably saw it if you have a subscription to the Modesto Bee. I presume everyone in the League of Women Voters has a subscription to the Modesto Bee, right? I mean, that's the main community glue that we have, and we can't lose it. But it made me get inspired because I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't know they were doing that. And the article points out that there were other speakers that they were with, like Faith in the Valley. And I had no idea who those people were. I'd heard of them. And another group was the LGBTQ group. And I don't know those folks, but it just made me realize, wow, I've been working on homeless issues for 7 or 8 years now. And I didn't know these other people were making this move. I think it's a brilliant idea to get low-cost housing in the Muni there. Of course, that doesn't directly help the homeless, but there could be some absolute homeless accommodations there too, like these, pardon me, these pallet homes that were demonstrated earlier this year down by the Brendan Theater. There's 8 foot by 8 foot, 64 square foot aluminum structures. And I have a movie that I can put into the chat if you want to check it out. It's only 3 minutes long about how to construct them, bring them in. Anyway, we could have some absolutely low barrier or no barrier shelter in the Muni, and then low cost housing. And it could even have small homes, tiny homes. What do they call them now? There's a tiny home category.
Tiny homes, yeah.
That
Mhm.
all kinds of those levels of support could really help. And so I guess I'm going to have to start finding out when the city is approaching the housing, Sharon, like the first and the second and the fourth Tuesdays at 5:30, but they don't always talk about that. Isn't there a planning process going on that is important to give input into?
Well, right now, we're just hopefully bombarding city council with the need for, housing.
Okay,
Yeah, right. That's what we're doing right now. And evidently this will take months. This decision isn't going to be made shortly. So
There's been a group set up by the city to have public meetings, and they've had a couple already interrupted by the COVID. There's one thing I want to bring up that I didn't mention, and that is you may have read in newspaper articles recently because of Richard Rothstein's books. A number of cities are trying to do something to get rid of the racially restrictive covenant. And Sharon, I think that's a terrible idea. That's covering up history. It's there. If you've got one of those on your property, it's there. Don't try to do anything about it. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's out. It's not effective anymore. And if you're offended by it, take action to do something about the current results and not waste your time on getting that off of your house.
right, even Richard Rothstein states in his book that he doesn't approve of eliminating those restrictions from deeds. And our county has special forms that can be filled out, and then they attach the form to the language, the racial language. And that's sufficient. And it isn't eliminating the language. It's sort of like, eliminating slavery from a textbook. Absolutely not.
We have our next question in the chat. Carol wants to know if your committee is able to get, if you're able to get the property, how will you ensure the housing will be affordable?
Well, that's going to really be up to the developers and the people that do the, what is it called? What kind of a plan that the city proposes? We'll have to
The general plan.
A general plan. Yeah. that's out of our realm.
Well, but we, I mean, still, the city can negotiate to have low-income housing, would be guaranteed. There, we've spoken to a couple of low-income housing nonprofits. One of them was a project of 138 apartments in Patterson that have very affordable rent. And they're just, we ran out there last weekend. It's just beautiful. It's a great place.
A one-bedroom apartment was only $367 a month.
And depending on your income, but it's, I mean,
Yeah,
that could be required as being part of it if the city wanted to. We just need to stress to them that part of that Muni golf course needs to go to low-income housing.
Excellent. All right. Our next question's got a couple of pieces to it. It says that from Diane that she's heard that the homeless advocates are looking at the municipal golf course as well. Is this in competition with your project? And she believes the homeless project is CSS, she thinks.
actually, we're going to be talking with Frank Plouffe tomorrow, I believe, aren't we, Dave?
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to find out about what he'd like and see if we can reach some kind of agreement, or I don't know.
I'm crashing the meeting. I'm crashing the meeting too, so I'll be there also. Yeah, Frank Plouffe has, man, he has dedicated the last 10 years of his life to the
Absolutely,
homeless folks we have.
absolutely. Oh, what a guy. Yeah.
All right, we have another question that says, do you know if there's interest from the developer community in participating in placing affordable housing out at the golf course?
There certainly is. We've talked to a couple of low-income housing developers, and they certainly are interested.
Excellent. And I have one more question, and then Robin, I'll come back to you with your raised hand, and then we're going to wrap things up. We're always mindful of time here. Diane is just curious what organization Frank is with. Is he part of CSS or another organization?
I'm not sure.
Richard probably knows.
Yeah, I've been working with him for about 7 or 8 of those years of his 10. He operates on his own, and it's by intention. He's a retired IT guy from Lawrence Livermore Lab, really smart and techie, and even install his own solar panels. And he works on his own, but he works with a group called Share, and also the group, the Modesto Peace Life Center. So those are the only groups that I think that he works with. But he was a key person in the Beard Brook Park village that developed after the 2018 decision that you couldn't put people in jail for not having a home. And then he also was instrumental in working with people in Mose, the tents underneath the 9th Street Bridge, and he's continuing his work. And another person that you never hear about that really is into the homeless issues is Eric Kane. If you are subscribing to The Valley Citizen, he has done a lot of stories about homeless. So Eric and Dave and I and Lang Power made that movie, Homeless in Modesto, and we're in the process of making another one. So I'm going to talk to Pat about maybe doing a report on that.
All right, Robin, you have your hand raised. We'd love to hear from you again.
I am just calling to say thank you to Richard and Lynn for their incredible presentation. And thank you to the League of Women Voters, of whom I have not been a member lately, but a former member forever. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. And
Thank you, Robin. Diane, you had your hand up. We'll take this as our.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that's Richard that is speaking before.
With regard to Frank Plouffe and others that are involved in the homeless.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that is Richard Anderson.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, Pat, I'll turn it over to you to wind us down for the night.
All right, thank you very much. Well, first of all, I'm fully aware of you can visually see the covenant in place in the west side of Modesto, where I did a lot of my educational career. And so it is very informative, and I love the fact what you're trying to do. Advocacy is always and getting the mic out there. So I applaud Sharon and David, your efforts. Mostly I love hearing more about the history, because that is so critical to what is going on now and the future. And it is so related to economy and wealth. And the part you brought out about home ownership and having the ability to own one and having the ability to have it as a legacy, that is something that we should all strive for, I believe. So it's been very informative. Obviously, there's a great big dimension to housing. We can go off into the homelessness, we can go off into the current status in some other parts of the city or the county. But this has been so informative. Sharon and David, thank you so much for taking the time and for your journey that you're on. Keep us informed, and thank you once again. And thank you to everyone for attending. It has been recorded. And so you can check back in, and you can look forward to our next Meet and Learn, which will be in January. And we are probably heading towards something on the housing, another extended piece on that to do maybe more with the homeless. So thank you, everyone. And I just want to say have a happy Thanksgiving. We're grateful for all that we have, and grateful for having citizens such as yourself trying to make it a better world. So thank you. Thank you, Amy.
Thank
As
you
always.
very much.
I see President Lori wanted to get a word in too.
I do. I would like to thank Pat and Amy for doing a wonderful job on our Meet and Learns, and for all the information that's really pertinent to our community. The last two were wonderful, and this one was as well. Thank you to David and Sharon for all the work you've done for a very, very long time. Our community wouldn't be what it is without the dedication of almost everybody that's on this screen right now. I've received several phone calls regarding redistricting and the last map that was published. And for our membership, which are all invited to join, just give us a call, Colleen, send us a check. But I've received a lot of information, and as a local league, we haven't done anything at the statewide districting level. We have a member that is sitting on the City of Modesto redistricting, but the last map caused a great deal of alarm and shock. And I just want to refer our membership to Marie's blast this week that gave some information on the League of Women Voters position on redistricting. And our member Colleen Norby attended and some of you may have as well, the Northern Valley Labor Foundation had a forum or an information meeting the other night, and she forwarded a good document that tells people that are concerned exactly what steps they should take and why they're finding that last map so untenable. But for all of us, we should, if we have a concern, once we see that map, we really need to reach out to We Draw the Lines. There's not a lot of time left. It's going very quickly. But if you have concerns about that map, you really need to let your individual voices known at this point in time. So that's what I wanted to say. And again, I thank all of you and all of the individuals from the community that joined us tonight. We love seeing your faces. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a happy Thanksgiving, safe and joyous holidays.
Thank you.